It is the Everton Byline. We are back midway through the international break now, but I've got Paddy here, fresh from his own little trip away. Paddy, how are you doing?
Good. You make it sound like I've just kind of jetted off on a nice lavish holiday somewhere, or I've been kind of away on an international break. But I was admittedly not working this weekend, which is quite nice.
Would you not describe it as a warm weather training camp then? No, not akin to what the lads had in Abu Dhabi.
It was probably a training camp of some kind, but I definitely wouldn't class it as warm weather, given that I was about an hour and a half from Liverpool in the Peak District. But it was very nice, admittedly, and a good opportunity to get away from Everton for a few days at least.
I had a nice but stressful weekend. So I got caught up in the train chaos on Sunday. I wasn't actually at the game, but I was travelling through. I timed my train perfectly, so like I'd be able to get the train from town back towards North Liverpool while the match was on. And I had my daughter in the pram as well, so right, I'll avoid all the queues there. And then I got kicked off the train at Sandhills with the pram because there's a trespasser on the line, which is why it was announced inside the stadium that all the services were suspended. So yeah, I ended up walking to Bootle, getting a bus, and it was awful situation. But thankfully she behaved herself, so it was all good. So it's rare for me to be moaning about travel, actually, isn't it? On this, it's usually you. So
it's nice to mix it up.
Yeah, nice change of pace for the international break. Let's get through some stuff anyway to start off with. As ever, just a reminder, we are sponsored by the Bridewell. The late evening sunshine is just dipping down here in Liverpool. I imagine it's absolutely bossed there at the moment. So do pop in as the nights get longer. Loads of places to sit outside. Still got heaters on and stuff as well. Just a great place to go and have a drink in the city centre. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the Bridewell logo in the top right-hand corner. You'll also be able to hit like. You'll also be able to subscribe. You'll also be able to leave a comment on all the stuff that we do today. We're going to be answering your questions. So hopefully a lot of talking points and debate. So it'd be great to hear everyone's thoughts on those. I know Paddy in particular reads the comments meticulously. Has been known to respond to a few, so watch what you say. I think watch what you say, but do comment. I'm not trying to discourage people from commenting there. Mixed message in there. It's the international break. All etiquette goes out the window. We're all in that kind of mode. And if you're listening to us on YouTube, you're listening to us on Spotify, or you're listening to us on Apple or any other podcast platform, do leave us a rating. Do leave us a review on there too. And just a reminder, now I've got 5 weeks or less than 5 weeks to run the London Marathon, or attempt to run the London Marathon. I should probably give myself a bit of breathing room there. If you'd like to sponsor me, I'm running it for All the Hay and trying to raise money for their charity, and the link to that will be in the description of the video or on the caption if you listen to the podcast as well. So yeah, Paddy, international break, not loads of talking points really from an Everton perspective when it comes to football related matters, so we won't delve into them too deeply. But neither of us were at the test event yesterday, as sort of alluded to there. We were both away, but we're sort of keeping tabs on it from afar. Just going to very quickly talk about that. Obviously we were both at the first one, and then we felt like a test event. It was amazing. I think we enjoyed it, and it was great to get to be in there and get a good look at the new ground. But looking at the footage and stuff yesterday, it felt a lot more real. It felt a lot more like an actual football match with all four sides open, with more people there, people talking about the atmosphere and stuff like that. So encouraging, and just it turns the dial up a little bit on the excitement levels, doesn't it?
Well, it does massively, and it's just we're seeing more people experiencing the new stadium for the first time, and I think it's quite telling for me that when you see Evertonians speaking about this, they're asked their thoughts. Certainly on camera, it's almost like 99.9% positive in terms of the feedback. That tells you everything you kind of need to know, really. I think for this second event, and obviously the second of 3 test events before the new site can have its safety certificate, this was all 4 sides open, but media weren't allowed in what will be their normal space just yet. So the media section will be right at the back of the West Stand upper. And I think in this case, most media were housed in the east stand in the opposite corner. So we're still working through quite a few of these kind of issues, not issues as such, but these things that need to happen with the internal fit out. So corporate lounges and all that kind of stuff. But obviously, it's all getting much closer. It all feels a lot more real now. It was nice to see Everton, even though it doesn't really matter much. It was nice to see Everton win the game and to score a goal from open play and all that kind of stuff. So fans could just experience what it's going to be like to be in the stadium when a goal goes in and when positive stuff's happening on the pitch. And a little bit like with the first test event, like the 24 hours afterwards, very much trying to get a sense of how everybody thinks it's gone, all the different stakeholders. So you've got supporters, journalists, people who were attending events in kind of more formal capacities, stakeholders, all those kinds of people. And again, on site. So if you look at the Bramley Moor dock site as it is, it seems to have gone really well. Again, it seems to have been considered a big success. I think it's when we get slightly away from the site that, again, like after the first test event, we start to speak about a few of the issues and a few of the teething problems. And there's kind of a variety of different opinions out there as to what happened after the game and even before it as well, if you use your own kind of very anecdotal experience. But it does still feel like we're working through solutions to get to where we really need to be on the transport side of things. Obviously, still work to be done at Sandhills. I noticed one of the emails we got, Matt, over the last couple of hours was talking about how there really needs to be some form of tarpaulin for supporters when they're waiting to be kind of shepherded to platforms. I think that makes a load of sense, given what the weather conditions can be like down in that part of Liverpool. So I think we're probably not where we need to be yet. The general view I've had, and I don't know if you could back this up in what you've heard, the general view I've had is that those transport issues were improved from the first test event, but it wasn't seamless as it maybe should have been. And actually, most people seem to be talking about more issues before the game because the more regular train service rather than the Sunday service only kicked into gear a couple of hours before the match started. So these are all learnings for the local authorities and the transport provider and the club. I think we are making progress, but it's slow progress. And I think we need to continue to highlight these issues because we all want to see the very best for the club and for the stadium. It's an amazing site. And it'd be a shame if some of these issues kind of cause people to have worse experience maybe than they should have done.
Yeah, like I think you're right. It seems like obviously there's more staff in place at Sandhills and stuff like that, but like I'm not really too keen to comment massively on it because I wasn't there. Like obviously I was on the train at the time the game was going on, but didn't experience the pre-match rush or the after game evacuation situation where everyone went down to Sandhill. So I think all people are saying, and I think you're right. It feels like it was mixed. I think it's probably fair to say the reviews of the transport situation were very mixed. And on some of the shows we've got coming up this week, we've got Mick Greenall, who was there at the weekend. He's coming on. We've got Steve Dickinson as well, who obviously wrote a really good book with Linda Lloyd recently about the Mashiri years. He was there as well. I know he's keen to talk about it. So we will get stuck into that and find their opinions on it all a bit later in the week. But yeah, lots to do. I think it's absolutely fair to say, as you sort of alluded to there too, mate. We did ask for questions this week to go through, sort of anticipating that the international break would mean it was going to be a little bit short of big Everton stories. And we've had absolutely loads coming through. I've tried to divide them all up, and we'll try to get through as many as we possibly can on a lot of different topics. I'm going to start with this one, Paddy, which made me laugh out loud this morning when I read it. This is from Ed EFC74 on X. And do you know, you see those videos and clips on social media, and you say, you'll never guess what happens at the end of this video. You'll never guess where this question is going. So he asked us, are we about to enter a golden age of Everton? Are we going to win it all? And if we are, does it foreshadow global war, destruction and misery as it did in 1915 and 1939? Basically, is Everton's success the angel of doom? Happy Monday.
Oh, God. I don't even know where to begin with that, to be honest.
Fair play. That made me laugh my head off when I read that this morning. I thought, oh, what a nice question. People are feeling upbeat and positive, and then you read it on, and you're like, oh no, wait, no.
How seriously do you want me to answer this? Because I feel like
you don't have to. Well, I mean, very serious. I think it's a very serious topic, Paddy. At the end of the world, and so let's not laugh about it too much.
Well, is it this? I don't want to get into quite dark territory, given some of the themes that are being discussed. So I'll probably just look in particular at the first bit of that, and are we about to enter a new golden age for Everton, which is probably a nicer subject for us all. I mean, I still think we're a long way from that, aren't we? So maybe some of those other things come before Everton are really good again. But I mean, here's hoping.
Don't panic, yeah. Don't panic, yeah. I think when Everton are creeping up the league table in a couple of years, maybe then we'll start looking anxiously at the news channels. But we had loads about journalism and reporting as well. I picked out three. We've had this one from Mailbag and post-match regular Foxy, who said, I've always wondered this. This is one for you, Paddy, because I'm definitely not in this, which is mentioned in here. He says, is there a, quote, trusted journalists WhatsApp group with the club as an admin, where the club post updates, brackets, players, transfers, general Everton news, with an embargo time and date? I've noticed a number of times that respective reporters of the Everton world confirm the same story with broadly the same words at the same time. Thanks. Paddy, are you in a secret WhatsApp group?
I'm not. I mean, if there is a secret WhatsApp group, then I'm also not a part of that. So
maybe we're both on the outside then in that case.
It's possible. Look, stranger things have happened, Matt. It wouldn't be the first time and it wouldn't be the last. But I think certainly what tends to happen, and I think most people will be familiar with the concept of embargoes, but just to explain those very briefly, the club will send on a press release of some kind with some news in advance, so that media outlets like ourselves at the Athletic and like you guys at the Echo can prepare a piece to go out to time with the news. So let's say, for argument's sake, we'll get an email through saying at 4 p.m. we're going to confirm the appointment of Angus Kinnear as the new CEO. Here's the press release. But within that, like, the unwritten contractual rule is that cannot go out before 4 o'clock. And if it does, you perceive to have broken the embargo. Everyone then will post that at 4 o'clock. And I think then that becomes quite obvious to fans when they see that news going out at the same time everywhere, more or less, that it is uniform, that it is something that's being choreographed by the club, and the club would very much set the embargo there. I think there's a few other things that we probably need to highlight. The other is, and the one we're often asked about, is that second part of the manager's pre-match press conference, where if you're watching it on YouTube, you'll hear Everton's press officer, Andy Neil, normally say, any more questions? And then if the answer is no, then the camera will stop. But Moyes is still in the room and he's quite clearly getting ready to do a second part. What tends to happen there is that written press then ask him separate questions for the newspapers. And then those quotes normally go out online at 10:30, I would say, normally the day before a game, but the journalists can agree the embargo themselves. So there, if there's something kind of particularly newsy in what David Moyes is saying there, again, all those journalists will publish the information at the same point in time. The only time it differs is when you have kind of exclusive information yourself. So I think for me, probably the last example, the story I broke was the Abdoulaye Doucouré news the other week about his contract option, the club option, having already expired. And because that was my news and there was no embargo or whatever, and nobody had told me to hold the information, I just went with it as soon as we had the piece prepped and we're ready to go. So there's loads of different ways it can work, but I find that most often when you've got exclusive information, it just goes out whenever you're ready and whenever you can get it out, because there's always that rush, not only to be right, but to be first and right if you can as well, isn't there?
Yeah, like I always find the half 10 thing quite interesting in the sense that I kind of feel like that's maybe becoming redundant now
Yeah,
as like print sort of dwindles and like digital sort of taken over because it feels like the digital audience is kind of not really there at half 10. I mean, I'm very rarely awake past half 10 these these days, to be honest. So I think to put like those sorts of quotes out there, and like I'm not sure necessarily get the audience. So I think a lot of the time, like they'll be saved to the morning, will be published then, so that like they're kind of fresh in people's feeds or fresh on stuff like news now when they wake up and we'll check it as opposed to being out of date by the time overnight's gone. And I think from an Everton point of view, there's not like loads of news and loads of stories that go up overnight, or, on social media or across the internet necessarily. So you kind of want it to be at the top of that feed in the morning. So I think the half 10 thing is interesting. I think there should be a WhatsApp because
yeah.
I don't know about you. Well, maybe you're. What was that?
Other clubs do have them.
Yeah, because
So in the work we do, we have our other journalists who are in club WhatsApp groups, and that works just fine as well. I think Liverpool always did it that way, but several others off the top of my head. But the advantage there is that you've got everybody kind of where you need for the information, haven't you? And instead of having to email kind of separately and to have separate conversations, you can just put all that information in one place. So it's a little bit easier. I do also kind of agree with you on the 10:30 thing, 10:30 p.m. I think it is starting to become a little bit redundant as we move into obviously a much more digital focused age. And what I tend to find is that if I'm there in the mix zone in the tunnel after a game on a weekend with Chris from the Echo or Joe from the Echo, certainly for an away game, we'll probably be the only two local reporters there covering the Everton angle of things and speaking to the Everton players. And what we tend to do then is, even with the lads at the Echo, we probably tend to agree on Monday first thing embargo, because when the people read and listen to stuff, whichever time zone they're in, it tends to be first thing when they check the phones, the commute to work, if they are commuting to work, or before work, lunchtime when they get a bit of a break for lunch, hopefully, and then on the way home in the evening, like 10:30, a little bit too late. So I think we are moving away from that, and I like this here kind of this embargo thing is, I understand, quite bizarre for some people, difficult to get to wrap their heads around. You do need some form of order, though, don't you? When a club puts out information like that and wants the information to go out to four, you kind of have to adhere to it.
yeah.
Otherwise,
I just feel like
absolutely.
I don't know about you as well, but like I'm bad at checking my emails, whereas WhatsApp is very much like when you've got a notification, stuff like that. So I just feel like I'd be less likely to miss embargoes if there was sense on WhatsApp. But I've got another question along a similar lines here, which is quite interesting from Tangled Up in Blues, who said, do you ever worry about subconsciously, in brackets, or consciously self-censoring because you're afraid the club will cut you off your Echo/Athletic press pass if you're too critical? It must be a tricky balance between journalistic rigor and the reality of your livelihood, dependent on access. I mean, it doesn't apply to me necessarily as much, but certainly since like I've started working with the Echo, I feel like I've had to be more careful just because of like what stuff I could say could impact colleagues who do go to those things and do go to those kinds of events. But what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of things here. That the first is that, like, just because of who I work for, I need to be fair and balanced and give people rights of reply when we write stuff. Just about every important piece of we publish. So that's not just about what the club think. That's just about getting through our own editorial, jumping through our own editorial hoops, and that can be difficult enough at times. I think that people focus a lot on clubs and how much access they are and aren't willing to grant, and what journalists need to do in order to get that. But the bit that's not spoken about enough for me is that we're all writing for and to an audience. And as we know, Everton fans really aren't soft. If we're not holding the club to account, or if we're not presenting an accurate view of things, then very, very quickly we will be told and people will stop reading our stuff. we ourselves almost become obsolete, to go back to the terminology over embargo. So I would say I am as focused on that side as I am on who's not going to be happy with something I've written. The other bit here is that actually, and you will know this, Matt, we don't apply directly through the clubs for passes. There's kind of a centralized system. So I think the days of clubs really easily at Premier League level being able to ban outlets are maybe a thing of the past.
Well, the club can definitely reject an application.
The club could
for like match day accreditation. Like this is, by the way, this has never happened or ever been threatened to myself or anyone like I've worked with. I'm just saying, like that process, like it goes to Everton and then it comes back that they can basically accept. They can accept as like for like a recent example. Again, this wasn't being rejected; it was just for space. Like the Merseyside derby, obviously the Echo don't just have Everton reporters going to that, so they'll have 2 Everton reporters, they'll have 2 Liverpool reporters going to that. So that's, and then usually for an Everton home game, typically there'll be 4 Everton reporters there. And I applied for an extra one for myself, purely like I wanted to be at the games to work, obviously, but I didn't want to miss the last derby at Goodison necessarily, and thought it'd be a good chance to get in the press box, good chance to work. And Everton came back and said, listen, we just can't do it. There's 5 journalists from 1 outlet is and you totally get that and totally understand that.
Yeah, we had one. We had actually for the same game for the Merseyside derby. We usually send 1 reporter for each team. So, be myself covering Everton, then it'll be James doing the Liverpool angle. We asked for 3 for that match just because we wanted a general writer there to help out with the workload. Those are very, very busy nights, and we were told that the press box was oversubscribed. There was definitely overflow. I mean, people will see the press box in the main stand at Goodison, but right at the back there are some desks that were, I think, originally set up for technical observers that can be used for overspill if people have laptops and want to type away. I mean, I don't think anybody our side perceived that as the club saying we've got a problem with something you've written or something you've said. It was just a fact of the matter that everybody wanted passes for that game, and usually we only have 2, so we got 2. The other thing is, and certainly where American sports are concerned, the access is really good. Like you'll see if you watch other sports, you'll see reporters in the dressing room, the locker room after matches, and that's obviously not the case in the Premier League and has not been the case for a long, long time. So when people talk about like being afraid of clubs restricting access, sometimes I actually say, well, what access do you mean? Because like we'll go to press conferences and we'll go to matches, but actually if you look at like what we do at The Athletic, most of our stuff is around kind of inside stories and news and analysis and various other things. So I mean, we can publish an interview with whichever Everton player, but unless there's something outstanding within those quotes, that won't do as well as me writing an inside read on why Sean Dyche left his job. So I don't really, it's not a preoccupation much. I am as focused, if not more so, on just presenting an accurate view of what's going on and making sure that we're keeping readers informed and that readers don't feel like we're pulling punches. That's always been the main consideration.
Yeah, I think probably myself more than you. I'd always maybe I'd probably be a bit more like fiery and critical and stuff on social media, and like I'd have to I feel like I'd always justify what I've said to a degree, but I think it's ultimately like as long as you can justify what you've said, I think as long as you don't ever get personal, I don't think we'd necessarily ever, certainly never done this on this show, or certainly not in recent years on any of our pods, but you don't want to be calling people out personally based on the football stuff. So it's
no.
So yeah, it's something you're always conscious of, but ultimately to do our jobs, you need to I think you sort of said there about people going to away games, you and the guys at the Echo be the only reporters. You will speak to Everton or representatives of Everton pretty much every day you're working. Yeah. So you need to maintain a good relationship in even in the most tested and trying of times. So it is a fine balance to strike, isn't it?
you're always trying to be fair, and sometimes you've got to be critical. But what you've got to show is that you're being critical for a reason, a good reason, and you can back up everything you say. And it's not just, I don't like this person or I don't like that person. I mean, we've spoken a lot before about Sean Dyche, and clearly now I think it's quite obvious to our listeners that I did not enjoy watching Sean Dyche's football. I did not enjoy some of the press conferences. But the job there was not to write about Sean Dyche the person so much. It was to analyse and scrutinise the job he was doing. And actually, most of his tenure, I considered what we did to be very balanced. It was only towards the end, to get at the final couple of months, where we really had to dig deep into the shortcomings and write about how bad things were. I mean, I think like my match piece after the Bournemouth game was the most critical match piece I'd done. Maybe covering Everton, but certainly in Dyche's time. So you're always trying to find the right balance, and even if you are critical and you almost have to kind of make your points. You're doing so, and people realise you're doing so almost for the good of the club, rather than because you've got a personal vendetta or you just want to sound off and you like getting antsy and RC. Like, people can look at your body of work and know who you are, and just basically say, like, he's not doing this just for a joke. He's like normally tries to conduct himself in the right way. Same with anything, isn't it? Try and conduct yourself in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, I dread seeing people looking at my body of work down the years on Twitter talking about Everton and various players and predictions, but please don't do that. If you let's move on. Funny enough, we've had some questions about Dyche. I know he's on TalkSport at the weekend. So we'll rattle through some of the last few questions quite quickly because, like I said, we've had loads. We've had one from Dave Wild who emailed in saying, love the podcast, especially the more obscure shirt number occupants. My question is, if you get into Sean Dyche's head, what do you imagine he's thinking about the resurgence under Moyes? Do you think he'll be reflecting on his own limitations in that he couldn't get a tune out the squad? And Newbie Blue on Blue Sky asked, I thought Dyche's interview on TalkSport was illuminating, not for the Moyes comment, but it was he who went to Farewell about not being able to take the club further and not the other way around. Discuss, please. So Dyche kind of answered Dave Wild's question, didn't he, Paddy, at the weekend? Dave sent us in last week in that appearance on TalkSport. But the stuff that Newbie Blue mentioned there about Dyche going to Kevin Farewell and sort of saying that he felt like he couldn't carry on anymore. Like, I suppose in some sense, like that's kind of got to be applauded. I know it got a little bit ugly after that with the talk over settlements, obviously the statement that Everton put out, and I think there's maybe a few people unhappy that it dragged on so long. But I think to kind of recognise when things have got on far enough and to go and have that conversation actually probably takes a certain degree of strength as well to recognise that.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably a couple of ways of looking at that turn of events, and one of them is more favourable to Dyche, and the other one is considerably less favourable. I mean, I don't think those comments on TalkSport will have surprised anybody that listens to this show or reads my stuff on The Athletic, because that was one of the probably the key points made in the piece when Dyche went. It was that he had basically gone to Everton and said, look, time for a change. I think I've taken this as far as it can go. So, yeah, no great surprise there, I'd say. He probably does deserve some credit, and not just for that, but even his role in keeping Everton up in incredibly difficult circumstances last season. I don't think you can ever take that away from him. I mean, to answer the other part of the question, do I think he'll be kind of reassessing his managerial expertise in light of what David Moyes is doing? No, I don't, because I think that's the character of the guy is that he's very self-assured, and he will, as he said on TalkSport, basically he will be sat there thinking, well, I kind of had a role in this. I kept Everton up and I stabilised, and then Moyes has just added a little bit on top with fresh ideas and fresh impetus, and basically they just needed a bit of a change. And I think he'll actually give himself a load of credit for almost helping engineer that situation. The less favourable scenario and less favourable reading that I was talking about, Matt, is that basically this was his first chance in a good while to get out, and first chance in a good while to get out early in his contract in a situation where he was still paid a decent amount of money. Now, I'm not going to decide which one it is because I can't get in Sean Dyche's head. But there's obviously two interpretations, and I don't think it went down very well at the club when he went and effectively said that, because I think the initial, as I've said before, the initial idea was that they would have persevered with him probably until the end of the season.
Yeah, it is like, it's about how you frame it, isn't it? I think at the time when we did the podcast on this, I think the title was "Did Dyche quit on Everton?" And like, I suppose like that is one way of framing it, but there is another way of looking at it as well. So yeah, I'm sure like in a lot of these situations, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Yeah. We've had this question. We had a few questions about this. I've just picked this one out from Paul Brown Rig on email. He said, given we have so many players out of contract in the summer, how do we think the loan signings are faring in regards to securing permanent deals? I'm going to rule two of the. Paddy's shaking his head for those who are listening on YouTube, who are listening on audio. So probably not a great indictment that. I'm going to say right now, I think Mangala and Breuer have probably got no chance of earning permanent moves just because Mangala's injury, Breuer's injury issues. The other two, like again, Lindstrom, maybe if you can renegotiate that trigger amount down, which I think is around about 20 million euros, isn't it, with Napoli? Paddy's again shaking his head.
What kind of fee right now would you want to pay for him?
No more than 7.5 million.
Right.
I think he's not quite a £10 million player, but I think fives would be low. So somewhere in the middle, I'd say. What about you?
The frustrating thing with him is that in really short bursts, he looks like a lot more than a £15 million player. He looks like, in terms of speed and his ability to execute kind of certain parts of counter-attacks at a high pace, he can look the real deal. The problem is 2 minutes later, he looks like a £1 million player because he's so inconsistent. He's quite clearly still striving to break that long goal drought. So, I mean, I don't think Moyes has been quite clear on this. I don't think either of Lindstrom and Harrison right now have done enough because he wants more goals from them. He wants more assists. And as we sit here recording, Lindstrom's got 1 assist in the league and Harrison's got 1 goal, I think it is, in the league. So, I mean, one of them's going to have to go on a hell of a run if they stand a chance. I mean, there is a distinction to make here in that Lindstrom has a permanent option as part of the loan. Harrison does not. So, again, that with Lindstrom may work against him because it's so high. Whereas Everton can go and negotiate with Leeds if they want to sign Harrison for a budget fee potentially. Mangala
very him forever, aren't we?
Well, the thing is, the mechanism of the loan was that Leeds had to remain a championship side for Everton to get him on what they call a free loan, which basically means they don't pay a fee. So if Leeds come up, Everton can't even do that anymore, to my knowledge. So there does need to be a decision on Harrison. I think he will want his own permanent future wrapped up this summer as well. So I think we are approaching a conclusion there on both of those two. Very quickly, Mangala, there was no option. And I think he was almost seen as like a late summer window piece of opportunism rather than somebody the club wanted for 4 or 5 years down the line. So, I mean, probably rule that one out. Breuer, you're not going to pay a £30 million option when he's not stayed fit, even though you watch him against England in midweek and you can see that there's still clear ability there when he can get himself fit and he can get on the pitch. Charlie Alcaraz is obviously the other one. And I think right now, sitting here, he looks like the most likely to be at Everton. But I still don't think that's a foregone conclusion. Everton, I've started him in 3 of the 9 Premier League games that he needs to trigger that purchase obligation, as it would be in that case. If not, then they'd have to look at going down a different route. So of the 5 loan players, I kind of look at it, Matt, and you think, if 2 are here next season, you'd maybe be a little bit surprised.
Yeah, I wrote a piece like just covering some quotes from, I think it's the Flamengo sporting director from Brazil, like about a week ago now, sort of saying or Everton. I think the games have started from that point of view. I think there's been a lot of talk over in Brazil about that, and there's a lot of talk about Everton potentially wanting to renegotiate or to try and get him for a lesser amount, which none of which I'm necessarily sure is completely true. But I was the amount of replies I got from people sort of getting a bit annoyed about Everton not triggering this already, and like we're going to miss out on this lad. And I suppose that the thing with this is like they don't have to make a decision now, do they? Like they can wait until the end of the season. They can decide potentially whether to play him for the requisite number of games. Like the ball is in Everton's court here. They have got that agreement in place with Flamengo where they can sign him if they want. And I think that the one I always go back to with this, why I think there's no need to rush with these things, is do you remember when we signed Connor Cody and on loan, and there's that option, wasn't there, for 4 million in the contract? And after his first couple of months, everyone was like, just pay it now, just get him signed. And then as the season went on, things unraveled quite quickly. And I think in the end, we were all quite relieved we didn't end up paying that 4 million clause for him. But listen, I'm not saying Alcaraz is anywhere near that, because he's obviously a lot younger. He's done really well, looks a really exciting player. And I would 100% be willing to, take 15 million euros out of Everton's budget to get him in. But there's no need. There's no need to rush in. Imagine if Everton said, right, we're going to give you the money now, Flamengo. Let's have him, and he goes and does his ACL in one of the last few games of the season. So I think just a bit of calm on that one, and it should all be all right in the end, because Everton aren't daft from that point of view. I'm sure they will recognise a good player when they see one. Let's go on to this one, Paddy, from Sam Reed. It's about Jarrod Branthwaite. He says, questions on Branthwaite, when you think he'll stay or go this summer. I've heard analysis, brackets speculation, question mark. But even with the improvements in the PSR position, a big sale is needed for Everton to spend at the levels required for the major rebuild we face. Branthwaite is the obvious / only candidate, and his being overlooked for the England squad is fueling the sense that he might want to leave. Much as it would be sad to see him go, with O'Brien a potential in-house replacement, could a parting suit all parties. I think there has been a story today from Sky Sports and News sort of suggesting that Branthwaite is not happy about being left out of the England squad and is considering his future as a result. I think one of my colleagues today, Joe Thomas, wrote that it almost feels like this international break has been designed to destabilise Jarrod Branthwaite with all the things that have been going on. But what do you make of that situation? Because it does feel like there's going to be interest in him again in the next few weeks.
Yeah, well, I don't think that interest ever went away. It was there before last summer. Obviously reached a bit of a crescendo with the bids from Manchester United. But, I mean, I understand that people were sniffing around in January. There are clubs watching the situation right now. I mean, like, my personal view actually is that, like, I find the England squad selection a bit baffling. Like, I can understand why, if Tuchel wants to reward club performances and wants to reward performances maybe on the biggest stage, somebody like Dan Burn might get a look in, even at 32, because he'll have watched Burn in some of the biggest games for Newcastle this season. And I think he likes the experience there. The fact that he's 32 has brought Henderson back in. And I can kind of get that. What I struggle to wrap my head around is somebody like Jarell Quansah getting in over Branthwaite. I just do not understand that at all. Even using some of that logic about playing in bigger games, like Quansah's not been a regular for Liverpool. I know he played recently in the Champions League at a fullback, but how much that qualifies you to be an England centre half, I don't know. Would England use Quansah at right back? Again, I don't really think so. So I didn't get that at all. I know then people looked at the last England under-21 lineup and the fact that Branthwaite was only on the bench there and read stuff into that as well. I mean, my understanding of that, by the way, is that he was later into camp than some of the other players, and therefore that's why he didn't start, and he is expected to go straight back in and start games for the 21s during the rest of the international break.
I think they lost 5-3 as well, didn't they? So not exactly a great defensive performance without him.
No, but I mean, they were playing France, and that French lineup is ludicrously talented when you consider Ryan Cherky and Hugo Ekitike up front and players like that. So maybe Branthwaite would have had his work cut out anyway. Playing in that game is one of those where you may be better to have missed it, and you can come back in, and if you keep clean sheets the next game, you can point to the manager and say, "Look, this is what I did when I got in the team." I think Branthwaite will come under sustained pressure again. I think Everton will come under sustained pressure to sell Branthwaite again. And I do kind of think, going back to some of our reporting around Jake O'Brien, that the idea really was to get in the long-term successor at centre-back a year early and let him bed in, because Everton knew at some point people were going to come back for Branthwaite. Let's see how it works out. I think clubs have got, if they want him, they're going to have to start being serious. Like the bids from United over the summer were laughable, given Everton's valuation. I think some of the speculation since, whether it's being engineered by some of the clubs who want him or not, around kind of an Everton £50 million valuation, I think that's nonsense as well. Ultimately, as well, he will want to play at the highest level, and he'll want to get into the England squad. So I think all options are on the table here, but what we know is that Everton signed O'Brien with a view to strengthening the central defensive options almost 12 months in advance. The final part of that question, Matt, I think was around PSR, and certainly if we're talking only about PSR, I don't think it requires a Branthwaite sale for Everton to be fine this season. That's not my understanding. I don't think they're in that territory. They may, a bit similar to last season, look to do what they did around the June the 30th deadline and do some business, but I don't think it would take a huge sale of Branthwaite, for example. And then I suppose, do they need a big sale to fund the spending spree? Well, no, because I suppose that gives you another problem as well. Already only got 12 contracted players, and Branthwaite is one of those. So selling him, and while that will make you a decent amount of money, you're going to then have to go out and sign another defender to replace him. So I don't see it as much as having to sell Branthwaite for financial reasons. I think it's more that if a suitable offer comes in, you're going to have to try and keep the lad and tell him he's staying. I think that's going to be the tough part.
Yeah, especially after he's stayed for that extra year when there has been interest. I think a lot of players, not necessarily, I don't know if Everton have sort of I hate the phrase gentleman's agreement necessarily, but they've said if you stay for one more year, we might consider it next summer. But I think that summer after the interest comes and it gets battered away is always an interesting one, isn't it? Because he's stuck around now. Everton really clung on to keep him last year, albeit they didn't have a bid anywhere near the valuation. So I think to sort of do it all again, if a big offer comes in, I'm like you. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Everton this summer, certainly when it comes to Branthwaite. We'll finish off with a couple of stadiums, so a couple of questions on the stadium, Paddy, sort of blended into one, and then we'll do our squad number section. Gary Deacon has said, after attending the second test event yesterday, I think everyone can appreciate the size, steepness, look of the stadium. Ignoring the transport issues, my question was around the plans for keeping fans in the plaza/stadium even before or after the game. Are there any discussions on pricing structure? For example, it was £5 for a can of Corona yesterday. If you want to keep people hanging around using the space, then surely that's not a viable approach. There has to be a perk to not heading home/back into town straight after the match. In general, £6.50 a pie or £10.50 a burger seems steeper than the stands themselves. And Newbie Blue again has said, with some of the negative stadium headlines coming from the usual suspects, have Everton done enough to get positive media traction about the stadium for next season? I mean, I will answer the second one straight away. I think they absolutely have, haven't they? I think they've done everything possible to try and promote this stadium in a positive way. I think they've done everything as pretty much as well as they can from a comms point of view, and in addressing what the supporters want. And I think that's kind of borne through with the reaction with what people have said who've been to these test events. But on the first one, Paddy, I suppose Gary sort of says his question, he doesn't want to talk about the transport aspect of it, but getting people to the ground early and people hanging around the ground after the match is only going to ease that, isn't it? So it could be an important part of sort of taking the pressure off what looks like it's going to be a bit of a chaotic situation at Sandhills.
Yeah, I mean, we met before the first event, and I actually believe for the second event as well, we met some of the caterers, some of the partners at Aramark, and they were saying that even at that point, the pricing in the first test event was quite fluid, and it was, we'll look at feedback. We're still honing the pricing strategy and everything else. I mean, that's something that has done almost certainly and will crop up in fans forum meetings again. It's absolutely the kind of thing that the fans forum will want to highlight, because as the question points out, the only way you're going to keep Evertonians in there is if the prices are fair and reasonable in comparison to, let's be honest, other local venues, because you've got places just across the road at Bramley Moor or back in town, which, I mean, you walk it yourself, you can be in town in kind of 15, 20 minutes, depending on which area. So if it's not right, then fans are going to leave. So it's incumbent on the club and it's incumbent on the partners to get that right. And I still think that's an ongoing process. The other question, the second part of the question was, well, have Everton done enough on the new stadium
generate positive media headlines? Yeah.
I mean, in terms of what the club is doing, yes, very much so. I mean, probably not a day goes by that I'm not sent some form of press release with some form of video attached on the progress that's taking place. So I think it's been promoted quite steadily and quite healthily. Maybe what the subject is alluding to though is that idea that over the last day or two, there's been a spate of quite negative stories around the transport situation and security concerns. I suppose you should divide those up into two very distinct categories. And it's what I'd call the good faith, well-intentioned stuff, and the bad faith articles that are largely scaremongering. And just to be really clear, like, I think we should be talking about the transport situation at Bramley Moor, because I think it's really important that we get it right, that the club gets it right. And that certainly media's role is to highlight some of these things and to bring them to people's attention. So, like, we're not doing our jobs if we don't do it. But what I've seen over the last few days has been, and this is to go on to the bad faith part of this, people who won't have attended either of the events in any kind of journalistic capacity, that are basically sat in a desk somewhere, at a desk somewhere, away from Liverpool, looking at screenshots or videos in isolation, completely out of context, and then writing scaremongering stories based on that. Like, where you need to be is right in the middle, and it's reporting on those things, but doing so accurately, being on the ground. That's where all the journalistic value comes from. It's in telling people stuff that they don't know. It's in reporting on what's actually taking place, as the Echo has done, as we've done at the Athletic, and shining a spotlight on where things can improve. Because I don't think the role of journalists is to be cheerleaders here. I mean, like, we've all written loads of positive pieces on how great that stadium looks, but we are also doing it a disservice if we don't mention some of the transport issues. I just think you've got to do it in the right way, and it obviously helps if you actually attend the event, and write about them from that perspective. So, I mean, Everton are doing a good job, I think, on the promotional side, but media are a little bit different. Media are looking at different areas, aren't they?
Yeah, I think you're right about the bad faith stuff, and I think a lot of that is from aimed towards a national audience, for people who want this to fail, and we'll see something like, chaos inside Everton's new stadium, which I saw earlier today, which is obviously just factually not right. It wasn't inside the stadium. So yeah, and I think you're right. It's sort of to appeal to that audience who sort of want to read these kinds of things. So
there's loads of supporters. Like, if you go on Twitter right now or Blue Sky or whichever social media platform you're using, and you type in a search bar the new Everton stadium, you will find loads of supporters from other clubs who want to, for whatever reasons, disparage what's taking place at the site, how it looks, the stands, all that kind of stuff, the design. So this is just another opportunity there, in a transport sense, to stick an oar in. You queue up Liverpool fans, Newcastle fans, fans of other clubs who just want to have a pop at this, and I suppose kind of sour what is overall a very positive and exciting period for Everton fans. So I don't think that should become the predominant narrative, not by any stretch of the imagination. But I think that a journalist's duty is to go there first time around, as I did, and go, this is an amazing place. But then in the days afterwards, it's to go, well, hang on, people are reporting some issues at Sandhills, so let's raise that and let's talk about it and let's see what people are doing to kind of help. And we can help out there. We can effectively help yield some change. And very soon after, you've got Steve Rotherham, the Metro Mayor, and the council and the club and fan groups all meeting. That's a really positive example of how things can happen. So no, I don't think anyone should apologise for doing that bit. It's the other stuff that, I mean, even I as a journalist really don't like. I find it quite pretty unsavoury.
Yeah, we will wrap up on the questions there. We've had loads more. Maybe we'll address some more of those next week. Ahead of the podcast we do before the Merseyside derby. So thanks for everyone who did email, or most of social media. I'm sorry we didn't get to your question. We'll try and get to it next week. We'll finish off, Paddy, with number 34. The very first one on this list is actually for quite a touching / sad reason. The last incumbent of our number 34 shirt was Anwar El Ghazi, who has worn that shirt wherever he's gone in tribute to one of his former teammates coming through at Ajax, Abdelak Nouri, who suffered a really bad issue on the pitch, and he's sort of taken that shirt wherever he's gone. So I think he's still wearing it now wherever he's playing, El Ghazi. So that's quite a nice touch. But before him, we've had a lot of young players who've come through the academy. Umar Niasse has worn it as well. I swear he's worn about half the shirts.
We've done a lot of Niasse chat already, I think.
He's had a lot of shirt numbers. But the full list after El Ghazi goes like this: Nathan Broadhead, Benny Beningame, Umar Niasse, Shane Duffy, John Irving, Matt Mackay, Francis Jeffers in 97, 98, and Paul Holmes was our first wearer of it in 95, 96. Do you have any strong views on any of them?
Strong views, no. To be honest, I'll go through a few of them. Pleased to see Nathan Broadhead having a successful period with Ipswich over the last few years. He obviously left Everton in quite a lucrative deal for a League One club at the time. A couple of years ago, with Ipswich still in League One, and helped them get promoted twice to come up to the Premier League. I think he has shown some bits of quality this season as well, but obviously they, probably pretty much look down now at this moment in time, given their recent results versus Wolves as ones. Like as a baseline, if you produce some players of the quality of Nathan Broadhead through the academy, like as a baseline, I think that's pretty healthy, because like if you watch him, he's a really intelligent footballer, good technically, has been capped by Wales, so he's had a really good career, and he's obviously at a very good club. Like pretty sure, like if they drop down next season, he'll be needed, won't he? Just maybe wasn't of the quality to play Premier League football for them this season, or they didn't think he was. The other one I'll pick up on is Benny Beningame, who looked great in the academy ranks, under 21. I think it was only under 23 ranks at the time, and obviously was very key in those Unsworth teams that won the Premier League too. But I kind of see him, along with a lot of others in that squad, as like quite symbolic of that crop and what's happened to them. I mean, like there was a load of good, like really good, solid pros that have gone on to have decent careers, as Broadhead has. Beningme's at Hearts right now in Scotland and is doing pretty well by all accounts. But not many of them had the ability to really push on. And that's why I think sometimes we look at youth success, we look at Premier League 2 success, and then we think, this side's doing really well, there should be 2 or 3 ready to come through. But actually, it's not really an indicator of anything. You might just have 11 really competent lads that are all going to have careers in the lower league. So, yeah, a little bit unlucky. Obviously, played for Everton first team and did very well at Stamford Bridge and put in some great kind of reducer tackles at various points, but has had a solid career since with Hearts. They're probably the 2 I could talk to you about. I think Ian Irving, was it somebody Irving? John Irving.
John Irving, yeah. I mean, I could not add any more to any of that. So
I think he's a right back. He's a right back that played in the reserves.
I remember Shane Duffy coming on at Oldham away when I went there to man mark that Matt Smith. the Giant, and then Matt Smith scored. But he was all right in the few games he played. Obviously, had that shocking injury, didn't he, as well? Where
Also a decent career.
Yeah, lacerate his liver or something like that.
Yeah.
He's still playing. But yeah, if you've got any stories about John Irving, Matt Mackay, or Paul Holmes, do email us at evertonbyline@gmail.com. Email us about anything you want. It's great to see so many people getting in touch that way. So thanks to people for doing that. We'll wrap up there, Paddy, because this is probably our longest ever show. As we're approaching an hour. Thanks everyone for, if you're watching on YouTube, do hit like, do hit subscribe. Let us know your thoughts about anything we discussed today. Do get down to the Bridewell as well during this international break. Savour these 10 days before Everton come back with a vengeance at Anfield for the Merseyside derby. And if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, do leave us a rating or leave us review. Cheers to Paddy. We'll be back again next week. Do get in touch and we'll try and get through some of those questions on the next podcast. Up the Toffees. We'll speak to you again soon.